When I turned 43, I didn't expect the world to pause and rearrange itself for me. Birthdays were no longer milestones, they were soft markers in a life that had learned to adjust, to breathe quietly. After my husband and I split 6 months ago, I rediscovered silence, not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that made me reevaluate everything. I work at a travel agency, the kind where every phone call holds the promise of escape. I'd planned countless honeymoons, healing getaways, and spontaneous adventures for others, always putting my wanderlust to work without feeding my own. Maybe that's why my team surprised me. 2 round-trip tickets to a remote island retreat where the beaches have no names and silence is sacred. "You deserve something beautiful," my manager had said, pressing the envelope into my hand. But the truth was, I didn't know who to bring. My closest friend, Alina, had hinted with raised eyebrows and playful jabs. But something deep inside me hesitated. I didn't want easy conversation over wine. I didn't want giggles over past lovers. I wanted something else. That's when I thought of Dorian, my adopted son. He was 21 now, tall and soft-spoken, with those dark eyes that never quite stopped searching the world for meaning. We'd always had a bond that defied simple explanation, deeper than mother and son, more intuitive than words. When he was a child, he'd wrap his fingers around mine like I was his compass. Now, he reached for me differently, with careful questions, small acts of care, and a protectiveness that felt almost grown. I knocked on his door that evening. He was home from university for the summer, headphones around his neck, sketchpad in his lap. He looked up at me, eyebrows rising with curiosity. "Do you want to disappear with me?" I asked. He blinked, startled. "What?" "Just for a week. An island. No internet. No expectations." Dorian stared at me for a moment, then smiled, slow, wide, and genuine. "Yeah, I'd love that." The island was a sliver of untouched paradise, hidden far from commercial tours and cruise ships. Our bungalow perched above emerald waters, and the only sound at night was the lull of the ocean speaking to itself. The first morning, I awoke to sunlight flooding our room through bamboo shutters. Dorian was already outside on the terrace, shirtless, coffee in hand, staring out at the horizon like he was trying to read something in the waves. For a brief moment, I just watched him, his back to me, his shoulders now broader than I remembered, the boy in him receding as the man emerged quietly, day by day. "Morning," I said, stepping beside him. He looked at me, eyes warm. "You slept well?" "Too well," I admitted. I think I forgot what it felt like to rest. We spent the day wandering barefoot through mangrove forests, taking naps in hammocks, and laughing over how terrible I was at paddleboarding. He didn't laugh at me. He laughed with me, the way someone does when they cherish your company more than anything else. That evening, after a dinner of fresh grilled fish and mango rice, we sat on the beach, just the two of us. No one else for miles. "Do you remember the first time we met?" I asked him, my fingers tracing circles in the sand. He nodded. "You were wearing a red scarf. I thought it made you look like a superhero." I smiled at the memory. "You wouldn't let go of my hand." "You didn't let me go either," he said. There was a pause, the kind that grows between two people when words can't fill the space anymore. "You've always been my compass," he whispered. "But lately, I've been afraid that I've started to look at you differently." I turned to him, my breath catching, not from shock, but from the honesty. The fragility of that moment hung between us like mist. "What do you mean?" I asked softly, but he didn't answer. "Not yet." Instead, he stood, offered his hand, and pulled me to my feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's walk. I want to tell you something." The night was unusually warm, the kind of sultry heat that didn't come from the sun, but from the sea itself, like it had absorbed every stolen glance and secret from the day and now exhaled them under a canopy of stars. We walked barefoot along the shoreline, our feet sinking into damp sand. The tide played with us, brushing against our ankles and retreating just as we grew used to the contact. Dorian walked beside me in silence for several minutes, and I could feel something unspoken vibrating in the space between us. Not tension exactly, more like a tether. Invisible but undeniable. "I never told you what happened last semester," he finally said, his voice quiet. I turned to him, curious. "What do you mean?" "There was this girl. For a while I thought maybe we'd work. She reminded me of you in some strange way, confident, warm, always watching everyone, making sure they were okay before herself." A knot formed in my throat, but I didn't interrupt. "But," he went on, "every time she touched me, it felt like a shadow of something else. Like I was chasing a feeling I'd only had once before but didn't understand at the time." I stopped walking. Dorian turned to face me, and under the moonlight, his expression was different, raw, searching. "When was that?" I asked, my voice nearly a whisper. "The summer I was 17, he said. "We went to the mountains for that agency retreat. Do you remember? You slipped on the trail and grabbed my hand. I was just a kid then, but I felt something. Something real. It scared me." I remembered. I remembered everything. The softness of the air, the way his grip tightened around mine, the fleeting thought I'd buried deep before I could name it. I had chalked it up to maternal protectiveness, dismissed it before it could bloom into anything more dangerous. But now, with the ocean around us, the island sheltering us in its solitude, and the years stretching behind us like a silent trail, I couldn't dismiss it anymore. "I think I've always been afraid," I said, barely able to meet his gaze. "Not of loving you, but of being loved back in a way that would be too much." Dorian stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of his skin even though we weren't touching. "It's never been too much," he murmured. "Not for me." I felt my breath catch. Everything around us, waves, air, sky, seemed to still. There was no past here, no titles, no scripts. Only this moment. "Do you think we're terrible people?" I asked, searching his face for shame. He shook his head slowly. "I think we're human. And I think sometimes the heart writes a different story than the world allows." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. We didn't cross any lines that night. We didn't need to. But when we returned to the bungalow, I caught him watching me with a look that undid me. It wasn't lust. It was reverence. Like he was afraid if he blinked, I might disappear. And that night, as I lay in bed listening to the waves and the soft creak of wood under his steps in the room next to mine, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I didn't want to disappear. Sleep evaded me. The bungalow was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I lay beneath the white sheets, tangled in thoughts that wouldn't settle. The room felt too still, too honest. The ceiling fan above spun lazy circles, pushing warm air around but offering no comfort. Finally, I gave in. Slipping on a robe over my camisole and shorts, I stepped outside. The night air was thick with salt and mystery, and I welcomed its touch like an old lover. The moon hovered low, casting a silver path across the water, and the stars stretched like confessions flung across the dark. I walked to the shore, letting the sand swallow my footsteps. The sea whispered secrets as I passed, and when I found a quiet spot beyond the dunes, I lay down in the cool sand, arms folded under my head, eyes fixed on the infinite. It was here that my thoughts stopped pretending to be innocent. I let myself remember the way Dorian looked at me earlier, the weight of his gaze, the way he said it's never been too much. I didn't know what scared me more, that he meant it or that part of me desperately wanted to believe it. I didn't hear him at first, only the soft sound of footsteps displacing sand. Then a shadow moved beside me. Dorian. He didn't say anything. He simply lay down next to me, close but not touching. His presence folded into mine so naturally that I forgot we were supposed to be separate. I didn't turn my head, but I felt his gaze. "This sky," he whispered, "doesn't judge." My heart squeezed. I turned to him, slowly. He was on his side now, propped up on one elbow, looking down at me. The moon lit one side of his face, casting shadows across the other. There was something so boyish in his wonder, and something undeniably manlike in the way he looked at me. My breath caught when he leaned in, hesitant but sure, the way someone approaches the edge of a high cliff, wanting to know what it feels like to fall. Our lips hovered, so close that I could feel the heat of his breath mingling with mine. And for a second, everything inside me screamed yes. But I didn't move. Neither did he. That moment, heavy, trembling, sacred, was almost enough to destroy me. I pulled back just a breath. Not enough to sever the moment. Just enough to hold it still. "I can't," I murmured. His eyes darkened with something more complicated than disappointment. "Because you don't want to? Or because you're afraid you do?" I turned away, my eyes filling with something hotter than tears. "I raised you," I said softly. "You were mine. You are mine." "But I'm not your blood," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You chose me, remember?" The words settled over me like a slow burn. That was the cruel twist, wasn't it?
He was right.
He wasn't of me. Not in the biological sense. I had chosen him. I had loved him fiercely, protectively. But what I felt now didn't belong to that world of soft lullabies and scraped knees. This was something ancient, human, complicated, and wrong.
And right.
My hands trembled as I pressed them to my face. I shouldn't feel this. He sat up slowly, brushing sand from his arm, his voice low and steady. "Neither should I. But I do. And if I scare you, I'll walk away now. But I need you to know, you're not alone in this." The wind rustled through the palms like a hush, like the island itself was holding its breath. I didn't answer him. Not with words. But I didn't ask him to leave either. We stayed like that for a while, him sitting, me lying beside him, both of us wrapped in a silence that pulsed louder than any words. The sea had grown calmer, as if it too had decided to listen in. Then, without a word, Dorian scooped a handful of sand into his palm. I watched from the corner of my eye, curious at first, unsure of what he was doing. He held his hand just above my feet and let the sand fall in a slow, fine stream. It scattered like golden powder over my skin, the grains warm from the earth. My breath hitched. He did it again, another thin stream, this time falling gently onto my ankles. Then higher. The grains moved up my shins, then to my knees, each time with the same rhythm, soft, deliberate, wordless. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something inside me, something primal and trembling, was waking up. A volcano, dormant for decades, began to stir. The pressure of everything I'd buried, desire, fear, longing, guilt, started to rise from the pit of me. I felt it in my chest first, a tightening, a heat. Then it moved to my throat, and suddenly breathing didn't feel automatic anymore. Dorian was still silent, his hand now hovering just above the hem of my robe, the sand catching the moonlight before landing gently, reverently, on the bare skin of my thigh. My breathing quickened. He looked at me then. Not just a glance, he looked into me, as if asking a question with his eyes that neither of us knew how to voice. "Do you want me to stop?" he whispered. I didn't know what to say. Every part of me was split, mind and body, duty and desire, memory and moment. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I'm doing." He nodded, as if he understood that uncertainty better than anyone. Then he laid back down beside me, closer this time, close enough that I could feel his body heat, but still not touching. "Not yet. I just wanted you to feel," he said. "That's all. You've been carrying so much for so long. I just wanted you to feel." And oh, I felt. I felt everything. My guilt, my confusion, my longing, and most frightening of all, my hope. The hope that maybe I wasn't a terrible person for wanting comfort in the form of someone who had grown beside me but wasn't born of me. The hope that this strange island, far from judgment and full of sky, could hold space for something that didn't make sense anywhere else. I turned my face toward him. "I don't know where this leads," I whispered. His hand was still dusty with sand. He reached out slowly, cautiously, and brushed a few stray grains from my collarbone. "Neither do I," he said, "but I'm not afraid of finding out." I stared into the stars. They blinked back, vast and infinite. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone in the dark. I don't know how long we lay there, suspended between confession and silence, between breath and heartbeat. The stars overhead didn't move, but everything in me did, shifting, unraveling, folding in on itself. I wanted to stay still. I wanted to hold on to the quiet as long as I could, to protect the line we hadn't yet crossed. But my body didn't listen. My heart had begun to thud in a new rhythm, one I didn't recognize but couldn't ignore. Dorian shifted closer. Just an inch. Then another. I felt the warmth of his breath against my cheek, like a sigh he hadn't meant to let go. My chest rose and fell faster. Too fast. I clutched the edge of my robe, suddenly aware of everything. The softness of my skin beneath, the vulnerability of the moment, the closeness of him. "No," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "This isn't right." I turned on my side, my back to him, pulling my arms across my chest as if I could block out the temptation by sheer force of will. But he didn't retreat. He lay behind me, not pressing, not touching, just there, the way he had always been. Steady. Waiting. Letting me choose. I closed my eyes tight, hoping the heat in my veins would cool, that my thoughts would scatter and leave me numb again. But they didn't. Instead, they whispered, "He's not your blood. You raised him, yes, but he chose you, too." I clenched my hands tighter, fingers curling into my palms until they trembled. My whole body trembled. And then, I turned. Slowly. Too slowly. He was already watching me, his face so close, the moonlight catching in the flecks of his eyes. My hands instinctively lifted, to shield myself, to resist, to hold back the flood. I touched my own lips, as if afraid they might betray me. But then, like a tide finally giving in to gravity, I let my fingers drop. He didn't move first. I did. Just the smallest shift forward. Our lips brushed, light as breath, uncertain, like the first stroke on a blank canvas. 1,000 memories poured into that single moment. Bandaged knees, sleepy hugs, birthday candles, graduation mornings. And still, this was different. This kiss didn't belong to the past. It was here. Now. His hand came up, not to pull me closer, but to cradle the side of my face with a tenderness so deep it undid me. I melted into it, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't fight the truth anymore. The kiss happened. It was soft, almost reverent. It didn't crash into us like a storm. It unfolded like a secret that had waited patiently to be spoken. When we finally pulled apart, I gasped, not from shock, but from the absence of him. My fingers touched my lips. They were still warm. Dorian's voice was low, steady. "You don't have to say anything." But I did. I had to say something. "I don't know what this makes me," I whispered. He reached for my hand, holding it between us like a fragile thing. "It makes you human." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle. I had spent so many years being a mother, a wife, a caretaker, a professional, always doing what was right, always choosing duty over desire. But tonight, I had simply been a woman. And tomorrow? I didn't know. But I wasn't ready to regret it. Not yet.